So you are in a session on aligning course materials to learning outcomes. I assume that you're here because you either have learning outcomes that have been given to you that you're going to work with, or that you're in the process of developing something and you want to make sure that they all work together. Some of you might be thinking, I've got some really good assignments, but I want to make sure that we're doing what we're trying to do. So what we're going to do in this first part of the workshop is introduce you to some ideas, have you do some stuff, talk amongst each other, and then if we get to the end of the hour and 15 minutes, we'll take a break, and then we're actually going to regroup into more tighter working sessions where we have a chance to really try some of these things out, practice them, and figure out which skills you're going to. So, first of all, thank you for coming, because school hasn't started, and technically you could be at home with your feet up, eating monologues and watching the one so far with the slide left on TV. Still my summer dream, which is good. So thank you for coming. I'll introduce myself and let these folks introduce themselves. I'm Cindy Bair. I'm the faculty chair of AU Core, and I also teach in the writing studies program. So I work with first year, I hope my fellow you. So I teach first year writing, college writing to students. So and we have just gone through the process of revising our learning outcomes. So steeped in all this sort of stuff.
Hi, I'm Brad Knight. I'm the director of the AU Core curriculum, and have been at AU for 3 years, around the same time that we started this whole reimagining of our general education program. So I've been really engaged in this kind of work, most heavily in the last year, now that we have sort of the bones of the curriculum in place, and so this is sort of our bread and butter of what my time is spent in these days.
Hi, I'm Kim Westemeier. I am the pedagogy and instructional technologist in CTRL. What does that mean? I am an instructional designer, so anything that you have in your course, activities, course creation, learning outcomes, I am able to help.
So the three of us are going to work with you this afternoon. So the first thing I thought we would do is, rather than talk about learning outcomes or anything else, is really to talk about change. Because that's at the heart of a lot of what we're talking about today is, how do you make changes in your work without sort of giving things up? So I wanted to throw these two questions out to all of you. I imagine that after today's lunch and all these other things, you've probably been thinking about it, but how do your teaching priorities change from course to course, from semester to semester? Because I imagine that they do over time. And then the second question, too, which is, what makes experimentation challenging for you in your courses? So let me just toss this out. What kinds of changes have you made? What's made it challenging? How do you change things from course to course over time? Go ahead. Yes, sure.
No, I was thinking because of all the places where I lecture and all the different, actually we were talking about the captions, etc. So I'm thinking, in fact I teach math and stats, so, but over the years it's like I experimented with, even before I think we have all of these technologies, but I try to do visualizations for my students. It's like, instead of just learning about functions, I think that which is abstract. So we give them how they can be represented. I've tried that. I've tried with more, yeah, even it's like changing the kind of examples, like from making them more daily life.
So the examples that you use in class, you sort of
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
How about some of the rest of you? What are some other kinds of changes you're making in your courses? Or thinking of making in your courses, and why is that challenging?
I like challenge. And I think this is individual. I cannot do the same thing over and over. It would be killing. I would die for them. So it's kind of natural and hopefully helping the process.
I always bounce between like 1 or 2 larger exams or 3 or 4 smaller quizzes, and how to break up the course.
So trying to figure out what kind of assignments to give. I imagine you're talking a lot about also content that you're covering. You're talking about examples.
Everything, content, method, delivery.
I'm wondering about the priorities. I feel like maybe my priorities don't change because I put student success in learning X subject. So I think that my approaches change from course to course, and even that is like on the day of like first class, I see like how this class responds, what their learning preferences are, and so then maybe adapting more. Before we're talking about UDL, the more auditory, more visual, more something like that way. So I kind of think it, priority stays the same perhaps, but the approach on how to accomplish that maybe I play around with.
Well, I mean, I guess one of the questions I'm asking, which is sort of embedded in that second one, making experimentation challenging. Have you ever tried something and you realize midway through, oh, I'm stuck with this, but no, let's just again. Yeah.
Yeah, I was teaching an upper level visualization course, and I assigned undergrads to review research papers and then present on those research papers. I'm not certain.
That's good. Did that go well?
No, it turns out that they can speak very well to examples of good visualizations that they've found that maybe are done by the New York Times or a company, but assigning research papers from academia, no. They don't often, they're too scattershot and they don't quite understand what the value of that paper is.
And so, a lot of times experimentation that we do that we find challenging, we realize next time I won't. Have you ever sort of been in mid-process and realized, oh, I need to tweak this between Tuesday and Friday? And you've been in that sort of boat? No. Not yet? Either that or you're sort of like, I'll write it out, see what happens next week. Okay, great.
Yeah, actually, I asked my students, what do you think about that? Are we on the right track, or maybe we should change it? And very honest, they said maybe we should try something else. But I think this is a function of the specifics, the course.
Yeah.
I cannot speak for everybody.
Right. Well, I think you're right.
Talking urban planning and visuals and Google Earth and a lot of ideas that might not apply to other areas.
Well, I think this is kind of like the tone we want to set for thinking about this is really that for those of you, because we're starting this new program, AU Core, so for a lot of you, that means new learning outcomes. Many of you, I assume, are new to our university, and that means adapting to new learning outcomes. Many of us have not really taken the learning outcomes that have been given to us by our departments necessarily all that seriously, and I encourage you to do that. But part of it also is realizing that my best of intentions may not always pan out, and how flexible do I want to be, and when do I want to be flexible? So sort of setting that idea of the change is all right, and adjusting is all right, and not quite meeting the bar is also okay, so long as you're not cool with that. So long as you sort of think that next time I'll revise. So we throw that out there, but actually want to switch it over to Kim. Sure. Who's going to talk a little bit more.
Then we have two more questions here. So what do we want students to get out of our classes? And how will students know they've learned what we've learned? What do you think? What are your thoughts on those? So I think these are really good questions then that we need to ask ourselves before we have a class. Start designing a class from scratch or using the learning outcomes that we're given. These are really good framing questions for where you want to go, right? Provide a little bit of a roadmap for you where you have this idea for a class distilled into learning outcomes and then moving forward from there. So I think these are really good questions to be able to answer, and probably why there's a little bit of a hesitation because these are pretty context specific, right? So when you're looking at a class, start thinking about these. Start chewing on them. So part of this then is alignment. So how do we take the learning outcomes that we're given or that we create, and how do we make sure that students know how to do what they're doing, right? Or what we expect of them. So alignment is a really good way to think of this, right? It shows the relationships between every aspect of your course, from an in-class activity to all the way to these very high-stakes assessments that we have. So it's helpful to think of all of these pieces as interconnected. They should be communicating with each other at each point of the semester. Okay. So then let's take a look. So these are the learning outcomes from diverse perspectives, right?
Just part of complex problems.
Part of complex problems, right? So these are pretty good learning outcomes. So you can read these, I'm not going to read them. But these are what anyone who is doing a complex problems class is looking to accomplish, right? So let's take a look a little bit closer in an example of what alignment looks like, what it looks like to successfully have your course elements communicating with each other. And you have the examples here on the page, on the handout page. So you don't have to focus on them. Okay. So I'll give you a moment to read this. But I want you to start thinking about those questions that we already talked about before. Start thinking about what that would mean, and then how those links for learning objectives or learning outcomes match up with this assignment. All right, great. Starting to see eyes shifting this. So let's take a look together about how these learning objectives match up with this assignment. Okay, so the first one we have is complexity. So where does complexity show up in this? This is pointing to the fact that real relationships are very complex, right? And family is actually a very complex concept. Okay, so where do multiple perspectives show up? Here. 3 different kinds of sources. So having multiple viewpoints pulled into this paper are linking from the learning objective to this assignment. Civility. An objective description, right? Not pulling in emotions in that. And also, too, academic civility, including a bibliography in that is part of that, too. So you can start to see these links between the activity and the learning outcome. So this roadmap should make it fairly easy to figure out what you want your students to do. Okay? And where's awareness? Nowhere, right? So awareness is not evident in this learning activity. If you have multiple, you should have multiple learning outcomes. You do not have to have every assignment hit every single learning outcome. That's not necessary. As long as you have at least one learning outcome being assessed in an activity, that's great. If you have multiple, even better. But don't stress out if each activity that you have does not directly relate to all of them. It's not necessary. But they do have to relate to at least one. Okay? So then let's look at another example. And this one I will leave to you and your groups. So you have the prompt already in front of you. Here are the questions that I'm looking for. Okay, so go ahead and read. And I'll probably give, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. We'll see where we are. All right. Okay, so which learning outcomes do you think this assignment successfully evaluates? You can shout it out, you don't have to. What about complexity? Is complexity in here? Maybe.
I think there was some question at our table about that piece of whether we thought it was fully evaluated. Do you want to?
So the inclusion of the word moral in A might get at complexity, and someone else suggested awareness. We were not sure.
Yep. Learning outcomes are not mutually exclusive. They do not have to assess one thing or the other. They can do multiple things, right? Even in certain aspects of the assignment. Good point. Yep. Okay, multiple perspectives.
The different sides of the issue.
Yep.
Multiple.
Great. And an awareness?
Not quite.
Not quite. Yeah, this table had a good discussion about that. Can you bring that out to a larger group?
Well, yes, I very clearly, because the text of this exercise makes reference to what generally is out there about true justice, but no reference is made to the own biases or prejudices that may exist on the side of the student that is doing this exercise. So there may be made several references. For instance, under point B, you could add a reference, just a side note saying, including your own perspective, and probably also in regard to letter number D, you can include a reference also to that the conclusions should not only discuss the different perspectives that people in the society can have, but also your own.
I think it's implicit. When you say food justice, awareness is there.
Is implicit enough? Does it have to be explicit?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, it's implicit. it implies awareness.
Right.
It opens your mind and a public discussion, about that. So that's awareness.
So then one could say then that by the sheer act of asking students to create or complete an assignment, that it is implicitly stated that they should be aware that they are a person writing something. Which I think that, I'm pretty sure these people worked very hard on these outcomes, that the fact that it's there means either it's not being addressed enough, or it's not acknowledged enough by the assignments or the students that it's, I think the awareness needs to even have an awareness that it needs to be in there. So I guess, because we didn't see an example before, like what would an example of an awareness outcome look like? Besides saying exactly what the outcome is.
So I could imagine, for example, in the last part of the assignment, it says somewhere in your product you should connect this to a co-curricular program you participated in. So just doing volunteer work, starting a petition, holding a forum in your residence hall, and you can imagine that you could beef that up so that students talk about what did you learn about your own norms and biases through this process of going out into the world, right? Because I think part of that awareness is not just self-awareness, but tying it somehow to your own group's norms and biases. And so this is a chance for you to sort of make that more explicit as a piece of the work. And so I think that would be a place you could really do that, right? Because I do think there is a danger that the sheer act of writing it will increase their awareness, but they might not actually realize they did that. They're just thinking I did an assignment for a person. Not that the task of this was to increase my awareness as well.
Yeah, I err on the side of being explicit. The more information and structure you can give students, the better.
Okay, right. So we're going to play with another model and go in a slightly different direction. So this time we're going to move into example 3, cultural inquiry. And what I did is I chose cultural inquiry habits of mind learning outcomes. So for those of you who are teaching classes in the AE core, if you might be teaching a class that's a habit of mind, each of those habits of mind have learning outcomes associated with them that we hope you'll meet. And so I want to look at the cultural inquiry learning outcomes. And so first of all, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. So here are the learning outcomes, and actually this time I am going to read them. So you can see the first one, identify your own or group's norms, biases, or forms of representation and recognize their implications. Okay. Number 2, ask significant questions about a culture or cultures and seek answers that include multiple perspectives and take into account cultural dynamics. Very, very good. And the third one, examine how culture intersects with power, relationships, and how this intersection shapes knowledge production, ideas, or behavior. And as you can imagine, as you read all these, they're sort of simple, but at the same time, there's quite a bit going on because our learning outcomes were written by the faculty, and it was a year-long process where anybody who wanted to could participate, and you can see that there's quite a bit of sort of everybody's trying to make sure that they see themselves in the learning outcomes. But I actually want to draw your attention maybe back to that complexity with the cultural inquiry learning outcomes. So if we spread them out a little bit, it's the same words, nothing's rearranged, it's just got a cool morph thing in transition. But what I do want to point out is in that first one, so it says 3 learning outcomes, but if you start looking at all the cultural inquiry learning outcomes, it's identify your own or other group's norms and biases and forms of representation. That's a thing you need to do in the class, students need to do, and they need to be able to recognize those implications, which is the second piece of that step. Look at this one. Ask significant questions about a culture or cultures. And seek answers that include multiple perspectives and take into account cultural dynamics. And then the third one, shocker, examine how culture intersects with power relationships and how this intersection shapes knowledge production, ideas, or behavior. So one of the things we want to sort of draw your attention to is when you're working with learning outcomes, especially those that you didn't design, or even if there are ones that you did design, you want to start figuring out what are all the things really? Because it looks like there's 3, but within those 3, there's stuff going on, and so we want to sort of be aware of how those layers work. So what I want us to do for example number 3 is we're going to go in a slightly different direction. So for the first 2, we really looked at how could all the learning outcomes show up in an assignment prompt. This time I wanted to do something different, which is not to be thinking about how it needs to have complete coverage, but actually just really good coverage necessarily in one place. Although, as Kim pointed out, they all overlap quite a bit, so I don't want you to try to be mutually exclusive of each other. But what I'm going to have you do then, for assignment 3, or example 3 is, here are the learning outcomes at the top, which I'll go back to if we want. Here's the prompt. And then in your discussions, this time what I want you to do is choose one of these 3, and then I want you to figure out how would you revise this assignment to get really good at one of those 3. And then I'll probably take a little bit of talking about what you want to do, but again, don't worry about if you're stepping on the toes of the other 2 that you're not choosing. But really to try to figure out how would you focus this assignment, possibly overhaul like 75% of it to get you where you want to go. So read and then discuss.
Probably.
I'm going to interrupt just for a quick second, but only for a moment. I really sort of want to draw your attention to that second question, which you're welcome to talk about in the context of this assignment or in general. But I think one of the hardest things about working with learning outcomes and designing assignments is how do you create an assignment that authentically helps them discover the thing that you're valuing in the learning outcome, instead of you just telling them to do this. So the example that I'm going to steal from the group in the back, we're talking about, like, if you're focusing on the 3rd learning outcome, which seek answers that includes multiple perspectives, if I just tell my students I want you to use 4 perspectives, they will, but they won't know why you want them to use multiple perspectives or why multiple perspectives matter or are valuable. So how do you create assignments that get them to learning outcomes without just telling them to do the learning outcome? Does that make sense? Okay, so something that's more authentic and has a chance for them to discover and make it explicit for themselves. Or go back and talk, and again, in the context of this assignment, or really in your own work, either is fine.
I like it.
Okay, so what we've talked about this far in our session really is trying to figure out if you've got learning outcomes and you've got assignments, how do you think about those assignments, right? And how do you work with those? But what we want to do in the second half of this piece, or of our session here, is actually to flip this around and come at it from the exact opposite direction. Because one of the things we want to make sure you understand is there's not one way to get at this, there's not one best way to get at this, there's in fact far more complicated ways to get at this. And we've seen a lot of things where you map all the things and it's really complex. But what we do want to sort of figure out is give you a couple of different tools. So the first tool is, I have some drafts of assignments, I have learning outcomes, how do I put them together? And now Brad's going to switch gears and focus on backward design, because it'll also get you there as well.
So with backward design, we're thinking about how to take our assignment and plan our teaching strategies, and also think about the kinds of work that students are going to produce. And then how does that map onto our calendar? So if we're thinking about this sort of in a sort of very simple framework, and then we'll complicate this, it's sort of like, what are my obligations, and then what are the students' obligations to this work? So if we're thinking about that, so we are going to take, again, that example 4 in your packet and look at that. I think it's the food justice, or the food justice paper. I want you to read through that again, and very just quickly, we're going to rattle off the kind of skills or content that I'd need to teach if I was assigning that project.
Some source material.
Source material. What else?
Well, you're not going to teach morality, but it's a very specific question to ask a moral question. So what are the other options?
Yeah.
You don't only have to think about food policy, food justice through a moral lens.
Right, there's sort of a content piece to this around sort of introducing the ideas and the questions, the theories maybe that sort of underlie and lead to them being able to pose the questions. So assign the readings, class discussion we might conduct, sort of checking for that comprehension around those ideas, independent research, suggested library resources, summary skills. If I'm assigning academic readings, do I have a sense that they're able to sort of get that, to sort of process that material? or citation style. If I'm assigning this paper, this project, but I have specific expectations around sort of the shape of that work at the end, what do I need to do to develop the skills that they're going to need to do that? Especially, I think, a lot of us are teaching courses that bring students from across the university, and I might have a very specific expectation around citation style. Maybe I want APA, but I'm drawing students who are maybe have not really found their sort of home citation style, or that they don't understand the sort of rationales behind the ways that different citation styles are set up. So maybe I want to think a little bit about sort of what sort of preparation and work do I need to do to make sure that what they're producing gets there. Okay, so now what about on the student side of this? What sort of assignments or work do they need to do to prepare them? So thinking a little bit more about, we've already talked sort of about, like, I know what I need to do to get them there. What do they need to do so that they're sort of developing the skills to then accomplish that final project successfully, so that they know how to do the things that I'm asking them to do. So if we take a look at this project, this prompt asks them to either create a pamphlet, a lesson plan, a wiki, blog, or a web page. Are there sort of assignments along the way that they might need to do to get there?
You know, I mean, with 5 different entry points, it kind of presupposes that they know how to create a lesson plan of any kind, or a web page, right? So there's a bit of technical acumen, I think, involved. Like if you're asking just somebody to create a web page and they've never written a line of code, it's a very challenging entry point for them.
And so we have to think about that. I've talked with friends who just decided it was really cool. They'd gone to the sessions at some point and like, infographics are really awesome. And then so they assigned one and didn't think at all about then when they were like, they're millennials or the new generation, like they know how to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so thinking about what are the sort of prior activities that they might need to do to sort of develop that ability before they even get to the content goals or the learning outcomes that you have for the assignment. What else? So yeah, certainly they're going to participate in some class discussions, homeworks, so they're going to summarize the readings. Maybe they're going to bring potential sources to class and sort of discuss them and talk about the quality of them. Maybe they're going to do a Blackboard discussion post. I think we often assign Blackboard discussion posts and don't really think consciously about the linkages between those Blackboard discussion posts and the assignments that they're producing, and the ways that those can start to be used toward these sort of ultimate goals. In-class exercise on citations, again, this opportunity for them to sort of confirm that they do understand if it's APA or otherwise. And then sort of maybe self-guided instruction, library research, maybe sort of different moments around that. Then you have to think about how much time is all this going to take? And then the question of, okay, so they're doing all of that. Did I actually still then accomplish what I had set out to with the learning outcomes for the course? Does this actually relate to anything that I am trying to accomplish with this course? So I just want to sort of pause there and sort of open this up to you for sort of a little bit of like group discussion around sort of the challenges that you've faced with this kind of work in the past, sort of the stumbling blocks maybe that you've had, or maybe like ways or tips or tricks that you've found really successful towards this backward design work. Successes or challenges, stumbling blocks. Cindy?
I know every time I try out a new assignment, I think it's really easy and straightforward, and I've brilliantly articulated it, and then they show me all the things that I've overlooked. I always underestimate how long it's going to take for them to get ready. I think this is a good 3-week project, and realize that this should have been a 6-week project.
How much time should we recommend, I guess, dedicating in the course to these alternate concepts that aren't part of the larger objective? So, for example, the teaching about websites, or a little bit of graphic design, or discussing morality or something like that, that's not particularly in the course, but they need to be able to do.
That's the million-dollar question, is the balance between sort of content goals that you have and the sort of backward design, the sort of competencies that they need in order to do the work, right? Like that's sort of the recurring question that we're all always struggling with. I think that there are ways to craft assignments that do both, that advance your content goals at the same time as they're sort of learning how to do citation work or discussing issues about morality or trying to build websites. I think there are also ways that you can structure the work in and outside of class, thinking about sort of if we are in a particular week they need to learn how to build something with a website. Maybe there's a lynda.com video that I can have them watch at home, but then I flip the sort of, ordinarily they'd be reading a scholarly article. Maybe we do more of that in class to sort of balance that in and outside of class expectation. But I think it's all about piecing all of this sort of thinking about how much time all of these things take. And if I am expecting them to do this and I want them to be successful at it, then I have to sort of build all of this in successfully, or maybe I need to do something differently. It's in some ways, we'd all love to have individual conferences and be working one-on-one with our students in papers and projects, but then if we're teaching a class of 60 students, we recognize that I don't have time to read that many papers and give comments 3 times before they complete it, and so then we end up doing more peer review, and we shift things and adapt in different ways to do that. So I think it's all about thinking flexibly about how to not necessarily shed things, but make sure they're in alignment, and that we don't shortcut steps because if we are expecting students to do that.
I would say also to leverage the resources you have around campus as well. So if you are trying to make sure that they're very good at citations, the Writing Center is a great place to go who does that every day, all day. And maybe you require them to go once. Maybe you require them to go 3 times. I don't know. So it's thinking about who else on campus is able to also help get your students to where you want them to go as well.
I just want to add that it's important to also think about, especially if you're teaching an upper level class, about how what you do intersects with what other classes are doing, and really means talking to your fellow faculty members in the department about how your courses relate with one another, and because maybe they have been taught citations 5 times at this point. And students do sometimes complain that there's some repetition in courses. So there's also opportunities here to talk with your fellow folks that are teaching, especially if you have got a course that sort of links to a lower level course, to see how you can build upon the things that have already been done on a lower level course and give them opportunities to reinforce them.
And you can do small stakes assignments in your classes, or low stakes assignments that sort of create opportunities for them to sort of demonstrate that they might have some of these abilities, to sort of self-assess their level of ability in ways that maybe they don't even recognize, that you're sort of checking to see if they know this before they have to really leverage the abilities. You had a point you wanted to?
Yeah, one of the points of the prompt for food justice was this question that's reflective, so you should connect this to a co-curriculum program you participated in. So that does kind of hold an assumption that they've participated in something relevant. You could substitute almost anything here. You could ask them to reflect on a recent athletic event that they participated in. The student hasn't done that, then you just assign them to go participate in an athletic event.
Right. So this particular prompt comes from one of our complex problems courses, and those all have 3 co-curricular activities that are built into the course. So these students would have had that.
But I think it begs a question that also gets to the website question and actually to the question that you asked here at the beginning, which is you want to be careful about overcomplicating your assignments. Because if you're, like for example, this assignment, which I think is nice in its idea, but you could create a pamphlet or a lesson plan or a wiki or a blog or a web page. what's the rationale for why you want to create a deliverable product? Like, is that part of your course, or did you just think it was a cool idea they would really enjoy? And if you think it's just a really cool idea that they would really enjoy, then I would probably pare this way down so they're all doing one thing. You can spend a little bit of time sending them some videos and get that out of the way. But to have them choose from all these different genres of things they're supposed to produce, and they're supposed to go do a thing, and they have to do this research, and like there's a lot of stuff. And if these aren't really essential to your course or your learning outcomes, let them go, right? And I think that's the part of the lesson here when we're thinking about learning outcomes is when you have to make priorities about what to keep and what to shed, let the learning outcomes be the wedding stone for your knife when you're getting ready to cut the things out. Because it can really help you figure out where to simplify so that you're in fact bringing to life things you really care about.
And with that, I'm going to shift and let you practice. So we're going to take this example 5, biological argument, and what I want you to do here is take some time to think about this assignment and to lay out what are the skills and content that students would need in order to do this successfully. What kinds of smaller assignments would they need to accomplish, maybe in or outside of class? How long is it going to take? All of those different pieces, and then we'll sort of discuss just briefly.
I'm worried that
I'm going to give you just about 1 more minute, and then I'm going to have you sort of, the last sort of thing I want you to think about in your groups is the learning outcome piece of this. So you've already sort of thought now about the sort of assignments that need to be used in the build-up, what you need to make sure you cover in class, but then sort of step back and make sure that if you haven't already, talk about sort of where the learning outcomes connect in here. Which of these natural scientific inquiry learning outcomes are they touching in those sort of smaller lead-up assignments, and which ones are present in that major assignment that they're producing in the end. So I'll just give you a couple more minutes to talk about that if you haven't already, and then we'll sort of wrap up here.
Okay, folks, so we're going to come back as a large group just because we got the wrap-up book in a second. And what I really want us to focus on, or think about anyway, because we actually don't have time to discuss this thoroughly, but I think there's a couple of big questions for us to contemplate. And one of them is, to me, this is the big question, especially for those of us who already have classes and then have been, especially if you're new to AU and you already sort of have in mind what you're doing in the class, and then they say, oh, by the way, here are the learning outcomes, is how do you balance the things you want to teach, the content you want to put across, with the things that students are supposed to learn in the class, which is not just content, right? Learning outcomes, the whole idea behind them is that we're really interested in the kind of work students are able to do, not necessarily the things that I've exposed them to. Because we're interested in the student learning, not the student receiving. And so that's that shift. So I think one of the big questions that we always wrestle with is how do you navigate that tension between content and learning outcomes? And then the other question that I want to sort of throw out there for you to be thinking about a little bit is the big question about learning outcomes, which is how will students know? And we were just talking about this over here. And I like this paper. What I think is great about it is if you gave a student this paper assignment, the one we just looked at, when they got done writing this paper, what are they going to think they just did? If they were summarizing it to you, what would they say? I just wrote a paper. Would they say, I just wrote a paper where I focused on synthesizing theory, observation, experimentation. Actually, they didn't do that one. But would they say, I assessed science-related content in popular discourse, daily life, or scholarly research, because that really matters? No, they would say, I wrote a paper on farm cod salmon for my bio class. And so the question I want us to also be thinking about, and if we're working the second half, you might still be here, is to start figuring out how do students know that this is what you wanted them to do, and why this is valuable or why this is important. Because a lot of what learning outcomes are about is helping them figure out, this is what Karen talked about earlier, is taking the things they learned in this class and carrying them over to another class. And what we really want is for them to not just think, this is how I carry over scientific courses, like if I'm taking another science class, I should do these things. But no, I want them to realize that assessing science-related content in popular discourse, daily life, and scholarly research is something they should maybe do in their literature class as well. Because it might not be science-related content, but although it could be, but the idea of considering popular discourse, daily life, or scholarly research, these are things that have value everywhere I go. And so getting students to be aware of what they've done. And Chelsea brought this up at the beginning of Shape to Lead, where she talked about sort of how do you make this stuff more explicit for students. And to my mind, this is really the important piece of what we're doing, is that having these learning outcomes on a syllabus, probably not enough. So what are some things that we could do at the end of the semester, or at the end of assignments, to help students realize, what do we just do here, besides write a cool paper about farm crop salmon? What are some strategies you might use? So give me 3 strategies, and then we'll call it done. So
They need to understand that this is the why question rather than what or how. And the what and the how questions kind of follow from this. So they need to know where they're going and why they're
So
going.
where would you put the why question in front of them? Would it be a class discussion?
Absolutely. I do it all the time. I was sharing with my colleague here that what I'm doing, it's an urban development class, whatever. So it's a specific context. I said, guys, you are doing this for you. Forget about me, forget about the department, forget about the university. You want to grow, you want to learn something, you want to be happy with what you produce for yourself and for the society, because this is more than yourself. And you are the ones to build America, not me. I'm a millennial too, but it's a different. So I keep doing that. And you know, like not every day, at least once in a while, every 2 weeks or something, because I think it's very important.
And it's an easy thing that you can do. So that I do in class, which is what you're talking about, is every now and again I'll sort of say like, why don't I just make you do this? Because I clearly didn't want you to just like get good at citation styles, because you might not have to do citation styles in 2 years. But like, why did they make you do this? What was really at the heart of this? And then we talk about what that was, so that we can, as a group, reflect on it, and you can joke about, well, it's because you're just mean that you want to make us do stuff. But then, what else? So that's one way. So in-class discussions, especially at the moment that they've just finished something, it's a good moment to talk about. What's another good way to find out, or to get them to think explicitly about why you just had them work on these learning outcomes? Yeah.
Like this page, put it at the top of the assignment.
Yeah. Or maybe even highlighting the ones that you're focusing on, so they see it in front of them all the time. If you do that, you'll be my best friend. So putting it on assignments?
And even highlighting, having the students with those learning outcomes at the top in the prompt, do what we did at the start with Kim, and highlight where you think those come up, and then having a discussion about that.
Perfect. Great. And one more.
A rubric with the grading, which gives students feedback, specifically on how it relates to the learning outcomes and the ways in which they demonstrated and the ways they could improve.
Absolutely, right. If you build a rubric that incorporates these kind of learning outcomes, or the things that you do value in that given moment, it reinforces these things really matter, and in particular, giving them the rubric not just when they get the feedback, but before they do the assignment, so they know that this is the direction you want them to head in. Those are pretty spectacular pieces of advice. Okay, so we are at the end of this session. You are welcome to stick around after a